Okay.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
A very warm welcome to everyone. Everyone today, our attendees. Could we have everyone first? Thank you. A very warm welcome to all our speakers today, our attendees from the different dance schools locally in Singapore and also from different parts of the world. Sorry for the wait. There were some technical issues that we had to handle. Welcome also to those who are tuning in, watching us on live streaming today. My name is Lisa Latif and I'm the chairman of Singapore Dance Alliance. I would be your moderator for today's conference. We also have our team members joining us today, Misha Haying, Artistic Director of Singapore Dance Alliance. We have Ms. Koh Kamui, Finance Director of Singapore Dance Alliance. And I'll also like to introduce you to our speakers today. Can we have their faces? Great, there. Okay, yeah, first of all, we have Mr. Yannick Shergan. I'm sure a familiar face to many, the Artistic Director of Singapore Dance Theatre. Mr. Yannick is also the Artistic Advisor for Singapore Dance Alliance and our Head of Jury for IBGPS 2021. We have Dr. Karen, Acting Dean, School of Arts Management, Dance and Theatre at NAFA, Nanyang Academy of Fine Arts. Dr. Karen is also the Vice Dean of the Dance Program at NAFA.
Good morning, everyone.
We have Ms. Phua Ziping, the Head of the Faculty of Dance at SOTA, the School of the Arts. Yeah.
Hello, everyone.
We have Mr. Christian Tachev, the Academy Director of the Queensland Ballet Academy.
Hello.
And we have Miss Joanne Michelle, who is the artistic teacher of the classical dance and the ballet mistress of the Australian Ballet School.
Hi, everyone.
And we have Mr. Trinder here. Mr. Trinder, who is the director of the New Zealand School of Dance. He's kind of lost you in a little bit.
Kia ora.
Yeah. Thank you everyone for tuning in today. Today's topic is for the discussions revolves around the current situation. As we all know, it's the pandemic. It's quite a big thing. And we all know that it's unprecedented since 2020 and has caused many changes in everything. And I'm sure everyone's interested to know how it has changed the art scene and what challenges we are facing moving forward. Shall we start with Mr. Yannick, perhaps? Could you share a little bit more with us about your thoughts and how this pandemic has changed the art scenes, especially when you're running a dance company?
Well, I think most of the companies have been unable to perform for a great deal of time. And that's caused everybody to sort of look at what we could do that would keep us artistically relevant and keep the company functioning and turning over until it was time to come back to performing. I think most companies are slowly getting back to performing. Some companies did go back to performing, but then have been, like the Australian Ballet, then had to stop again. So I think everybody's situation is slightly different. But I can only speak for in our case, what we did was we did an awful lot of online things. We literally were doing 4 or 5 different online things every single week. And then we got to online fatigue, where people would, you know, they've seen so much online throughout the world that it became a little bit problematic. For myself, I found it interesting to see who I really liked watching their online offerings. I really enjoyed the National Ballet of Canada's online offerings. I thought theirs were very, very well put together and interesting. I really enjoyed New York City Ballets. There were a couple of organizations that I didn't quite get into. Then there was the interesting thing of if someone is asking you to pay or not, because there were so many places that were doing it free of charge. And there were so many other people that said, well, we have to try to generate income. And that became, for us, we decided to go completely free. And so we did a children's ballet that was put online that worked very well. And we did 4 different programs weekly, plus we did some classes online. And I was saying to everybody that's on the panel right beforehand that the online classes had an interesting impact on some of our students, which was beneficial in the long run. So while online classes might not be perfect, something good came out of it in our case for one young dancer, and led to some. So there's good things that can possibly come from this. I mean, I think that's a bad way to suggest it, but there are possibilities. But I think everybody's looking forward to trying to find their way out of this, and I think it will change the whole way that we function. But I think that the concept of online classes is questionable at best. I think things can be learned, but I think it's difficult. It's no replacement for actual classes, but it can be an interesting way to stimulate people to look farther than the confines of their own studio.
Yes, I do realize, I mean, online dance training has become quite a new normal, and it also has opened quite a, doors. But I mean, Ziping, would you be able to share, like, you two have been doing some online training as well, as much as we know there are limitations to online learning, but what are the positive aspects of it, do you think?
Yeah. For us, yes, we have to adapt to online learning, and similar to what Mr. Sherman has shared, I mean, there are some positive outcomes from this. One I could think of, and which is also shared with my team of teachers, is that learning could be more personalized in that way that when it's a asynchronized kind of learning, students could play back the lessons, they could review and learn at their own pace. But that requires a lot of independence on the part, and as well as maturity. Positive. So one thing that came out really that we all celebrated as teachers is that the students started to become more independent, that we would have the maturity.
Thank you, Ms. Ziping. How about Ms. Joanne? I know that you yourself have been doing the online training, the actual dance classes as well. I mean, are there things that you have seen that you may not realize that you would have done if you see them physically? I mean,
yes, because we've been in lockdown for a long time. Last year was really challenging initially. I think this year we all knew what to expect, so we were a little bit more prepared when we did have to go into lockdown, which we've been fortunate, hasn't been for as long a period, but from last year, and a little bit the same with the students becoming a little bit more independent, because with classes online, you can see your students, and when you've got a larger group, it's difficult to give individual corrections. So because I take the graduate levels, so they're older students, and it's part of their growth and their training anyway, that we try and equip them to be able to be self-reliant and be self-disciplined, which they really desperately needed to be like that, because online it was a challenge to, they would have to get up in the morning and find their motivation. So we found different ways of motivating, changing how we did our classwork. A lot of the students didn't have big areas, so there was a lot of adaptation happening all the time. And as much as just focusing on their basic technique, it actually gave us a lot of time to spend just going back, and instead of pushing forward constantly trying to get to the end, we knew that we only had a certain amount of time that we needed to spend just being a little bit more conscious of refining their technique, refining and going back to basics. And when we finally got back in the studio, that work paid off incredibly. We were so surprised, actually, that when we came back in the studio, the students were very ready to be working hard, because I personally, and I think all our teachers, we worked slowly, because initially you don't know how much you can do. And then we realized that the students were giving us information. Yes, we can do more. Yes, we want more. So over this period, it's really taught the students a lot about themselves and what they can achieve, considering what they've been used to. So it's been a learning process for both. For the teachers, for us to be technically minded is not my forte. To try and work Zoom and put your music on and be able to share your screen and doing repertoire work, and this was challenging for everybody. So I think when you get back in the studio, you realize how lucky we are when we are there.
Yeah. Thank you, Ms. Joanne. Yes, I do agree. I mean, when you talk about the discipline and having to make them feel motivated, Dr. Karen, would you like to share a little bit about how we can perhaps help in the motivation? I mean, we had a couple of home-based learning in Singapore, right? So how did you manage to motivate them to continue?
Well, yeah, just adding on to what Joanne was saying, that we had to become more technically savvy. And I think part of the motivation or keeping students captivated, interested, was perhaps using things like artificial intelligent webcams that could actually follow you as you moved, things like that. So things were more, so the experience would be more interactive and therefore more engaging for students online, recognizing that, we were fortunate that in August of 2020, we were able to, have rotational classes on campus. So again, keeping the motivation going by when we were on campus and in a big studio, to really move, to celebrate the space and also to perhaps take videos while we could, while we were in the space. And then on the days that we were not on campus, when we had to do home-based learning, then to view those videos and maybe take a critical eye to our training. So the motivation was to offer students the ability to see themselves and to also self-critique. Yes, yeah. And just to also be great and to practice gratitude, Yes, when you're back in the studio, again, isn't this a wonderful space? Isn't it wonderful to be with your teachers? Isn't it wonderful to be with other dancers? Yeah, to celebrate dance and our art form.
Thank you, Dr. Karen. Well, moving forward, I mean, with all these pandemic, I'm sure most of the schools are also affected in terms of their intakes for the students. How have the schools been able to manage that in the context of intakes? What about Gary, would you be able to share a little bit more about the context in terms of the intakes, like, the students coming in to New Zealand School of Dance?
Yeah, it's obviously been the same challenge that everybody's faced, because our borders remain closed to all international travelers. So we opened for a short, brief period a trans-Tasman bubble, which meant quarantine-free travel between Australia and New Zealand. But with the spread of the Delta variant in New Zealand, that travel bubble has now closed. So my colleagues and myself were due to be traveling to Australia for our annual audition tour, which we'd not been able to undertake in 2020. And we were really hopeful that we would be visiting Sydney and Melbourne and Brisbane. And unfortunately, that's had to be curtailed. So it means that we are increasingly more reliant on digital auditions. And we've got sort of three approaches. Obviously, within New Zealand, we hope to have physical auditions with all our New Zealand applicants. Australia, we would be reliant on digital auditions. And for international students, our government has advised that the potential for international students to gain entry into New Zealand is unlikely before 2023. So there's some significant impact in terms of numbers. And of course, that also places an economic strain on the school as well.
Thank you, Mr. Gary. How about Mr. Christian, on your side in Queensland?
Very similar to what Gary has just discussed, and I really second everything that has been said so far. We've been very lucky in Queensland that we haven't had lockdowns at the extremity that Joanne is seeing. I really feel for the dancers in Melbourne. We are very limited in the way we can recruit dancers at the moment as well. With us, the borders remain locked, and last year we've had some international students who were granted a student visa, but they needed an exemption to come to Australia, but that was never granted. So we have enrolled students who should have been enrolled, who have the visa, but just can't actually get here. They can't get on a plane to Australia. And similarly to what Gary has just discussed, we holding audition. We had auditions last weekend and this weekend and next week, and we have an audition for people who are based in Queensland, the United States. But even within Australia, we are not traveling interstate at the moment. So every audition has to be online for students in Victoria or New South Wales. So it is a great limitation. For a couple of years now, we haven't been able to do, we've had to cancel 5 workshops this year, our summer school, winter schools, our elite training series, which is sessions that we actually go interstate and we offer a training and we recruit dancers. We haven't been able to hold these for 2 years now. And I guess at our end, we have been very blessed that we've had very limited lockdowns and for shorter periods of time. But every morning, I really don't know what's going to happen because until government has come on the news at 10 o'clock in the morning and said the numbers are this many and we are going to lockdown or not, we really don't know how to operate. So with us, there's great uncertainty every single day. So we don't know that there's a lockdown for 3 weeks or 3 months. Every day there could be a lockdown or not. And there's a very, very low, I mean, if you look at it as a business, as Gary said, it is affecting the school economically because there's no consumer confidence. A parent doesn't want to send their child interstate or even if within the same state. Australia is a very, very big place. From one city to another, you can have a lockdown in a city, but not in another city. So people are not really willing to travel or even send their students to another place to study. So it is a great challenge. We're doing a lot of video auditions. It has its challenges.
Yeah, one of the other questions that somebody has posed regards to the auditions to schools. Where can they find all this information? Is it from all the websites of the schools, especially now with the lockdowns and all that? Is it, Gary, that we can find all the information in the school website?
Yes, we have been regularly updating our website based upon, as Christian said, you end up with scenario A, B, C, and D, and obviously what you anticipate on Monday changes on Thursday. So we're continuously advising everybody to follow our social media platforms and our website. And unfortunately, it is very fragile, and it's not a scenario that any of us want, but quite often these situations are imposed on us in terms of government restriction.
Thank you, Mr. Gary. So, but Dr. Karen, we are a bit luckier in Singapore in terms that you had Eugene, last year's IBGPS winner, joining us at NAFA this year, right? That was just...
Yes, that's very correct. Wow, okay, where do I begin? Because a lot of it has already been said. NAFA has been very fortunate. Our 2020 intake, in fact, we exceeded our target. And in our 2021 intake, we have met our targets. Now, some of that has to do with, as we talked about, travel restrictions, where those students that were perhaps considering going overseas and not being able to, but wanting to start their training now as you know, and as anxious as we know, it's very important to keep active and keep training. So many of those students have come to us. But then on the other side, international students that would have come to us, but luckily Eugene was fortunate because she was already here just before the lockdown. She was here during the lockdown. Yeah, so there were restrictions of students coming in. But as the restrictions ease, we are seeing more students joining us from overseas, albeit now we've had to adapt to have them come in when they receive what we call entry approval from our government. So that means that while we accept them, it depends when Singapore allows them to enter. So we have been seeing students coming in from China, no problem. But other countries such as Thailand, Indonesia, Philippines, those countries are a bit more problematic. And so, when the borders, so to speak, open, they come in. And so some of them, unfortunately, are starting the semester. For example, we started the semester in August, are coming in not typically like in the past where they would all come in at the beginning for orientation week. We're seeing them coming in, when they receive their approval. So even up until today. And then there are those we are really not so hopeful. I hate to say that, but for example, from countries like India and Indonesia, where the cases are still very, very, very high, we are not sure if they'll be able to make it this semester, but we hope to have them come in, to join us by January 2022. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Karen. There's another question that is quite popular. We had a couple of people that wrote into us to ask about the age, the ages that the students should start moving forward to do vocational training and all that. Could we have a little bit more information about that? Ms. Joanne, perhaps would you like to share something about that? Like what age appropriate is it for them to start doing vocational?
Well, we have our level 5s, which are sort of 14, 15, is where we have them as full-time students. So they come, they do their training as well as their academic work. Probably for us, that's a good age to start, particularly as we do get the interstate students. So it's really obviously parents wanting and allowing their young daughter or son to come and leave home. Some families have, moved states to be here in Victoria so that they can give their children the best possible opportunity. But having said that, it's so dependent on the student themselves, because sometimes, there can be a younger student who really has the drive and the determination and are ready to be, vocational students. It is really such an individual thing, I believe, and it's important that they feel that when they do come to do this full-time work, that they have a safe and secure environment. We have now a residence for students, so overseas students and for interstate students, where they can be, they live together in a very big residence. So that has really made a difference for students coming to Victoria. So we're in the same situation. We're not able to have open auditions. We can't go anywhere. It's all online. So it's made it a little difficult. And so the level that will be coming into the first full-time year, again, it's really dependent on what's out there, what students want to make that trip. And again, our borders are locked. We don't know for how long. It's very difficult to travel in between states. So again, we could get a lot of students wanting to audition and auditioning, but can they come to Victoria? Or it's such a big question mark at the moment. And we're just waiting and hoping.
So with regards to the the age that they start? And what about the choice of the schools? You know, I mean, at this point in time, the restrictions is one, but what about, like, you know, schools that fit to that particular students? Like, you know, parents will have to think about, or teachers will have to help them think about which schools are the best for them. Maybe, and then following on to that would be the company if they wanted to become a professional dancers. Mr. Yannick, would you like to share a little bit about that? Like, you know, different schools that suits perhaps different students, and then following up through that will be the company.
The thing that I've always worried about is the fact that very talented students and very, very good schools, sometimes everybody would think perfect match. And oftentimes that is not the case. The schools that I often recommend are the schools that are most interested in, from the moment that they enter that school, they're thinking about where they can place that student if they succeed through their 2 or 3 year training program. And I have to say, I mean, even though Gary's sitting right there, I've always recommended New Zealand School of Dance as a first choice, because from the moment that a student enters New Zealand School of Dance, Gary is thinking about, okay, this is the possibilities for this student in 3 years' time, and making those avenues and making those connections. And there are many schools that take in students and think, well, when you graduate, you find a job. And that's problematic, because there are, and particularly now, because when we talk about how young a student, but when you talk about age at the top level, there was a student who came to me and said, well, we're going to wait a couple of years. And you go, if you wait a couple of years, you might as well not go. Because at that point, if you're going to enter a 3 year program and you think that you can wait beyond a certain point, a student might become truthfully unemployable. Now that's before this situation. I think that all the schools are going to have to start looking at older students, because nobody can go anywhere. And so where a student would ideally enter at 16, 17, and maybe not, well, 18 at the top level, I think that that's going to be increasingly an issue right now, because no one can travel. But the more important thing is that schools that are interested in their students finding whatever professional opportunities, it doesn't matter if it's a career in ballet contemporary, or if they want to become a teacher, if they want to do commercial dance. I mean, that's one of the things that really good schools start thinking about very early on in a student's possibilities. And that's why, and again, I'm sorry to keep talking about the fact of New Zealand School of Dance, but I see the success over the 20 years that I've known New Zealand School of Dance to produce dancers that have gone everywhere from being a principal at the National Ballet of Canada to being a dancer at the Folies Bergère. And all of those are successes, you know, and that's what a school's objective should be, is finding the possibilities for a dancer that dancer expresses, not that the particular teacher wants them to do, but what the dancer is. And I think that there are many schools that actually take that very, very seriously. And then truthfully, there are other schools that don't. And not every student that goes into a company school, if you go into X school, doesn't mean you're going to get into X company. That doesn't mean it's been a failure. Just means that there might not have been the opportunities that particular year, or it might be that you're not suitable to that particular company, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But it is a very, very large issue that doesn't get discussed often enough. A very large issue.
Thank you, Mr. Yannick. Well, in terms of the parents choosing the schools for their kids, then what about on the other side? How about the schools? What are the requirements? I mean, parents would want, a lot of the teachers would want to know, how do you choose? How do they make themselves better in order for the schools to actually consider them as a good candidate? Mr. Christian, would you like to share a little bit more about that?
Thank you, Liz. I think first I want to acknowledge what Yannick says is absolutely right. And when it comes to choosing a student for an organization, whether it's a school or a company, our job as someone on the panel wouldn't be to say this is a good dancer or a bad dancer, is to identify whether we are right fit for each other, which again speaks to what Yannick said earlier. Just because someone's not the right fit for one school or one company doesn't mean it's not going to be a success story. So I think what we do in the last 2 years of our training is actually hold career preparation sessions where we assess, not assess, but help our dancers identify what dancers they're going to be as dancers. And early, before graduation, we have these conversations with them. So when we're choosing dancers, and it's really hard to predict when someone is 11, how they're going to develop by the time they're 18 years of age, of course. But when we're choosing dancers, we're looking for talent and potential. And then as that potential and talent develops, we are going to channel them into different genres that they would be more successful into. And we've always said we could the Queensland Ballet Academy, but we're not training dancers for Queensland Ballet, we train dancers. So, you know, we're not looking for particular body type or particular style of movement or particular anything, particular look. We're actually looking for potential. And talent and potential mean many things, and the ideal ballet body is not talent, that's just facility. So I think, I mean, I can't tell you what every school is looking for. It really is, it probably would depend on the taste of the teaching staff. It will depend the taste of the director, the style of the company. Like for us, we have Queensland Ballet with Australian Ballet or Singapore Dance Theatre. It doesn't really matter. I think it's more important for the parents and the students to identify what they want to get out of their training and what their goals are. So if they want to be a more neoclassic contemporary dancer, then they need to go to that school that will offer that training. If they want to be very classical, they need to identify that or training organization to give them those tools to succeed. So I don't think there's a blanket approach that we can say, especially the world has changed the world in dance so much in the last, I mean, gosh, when I was training in the Vaganova style, there was just one way of doing things in our schools, which is completely not correct. If you look at the industry now, the industry has evolved, dances are much more athletic, everything is much more scientific. I think I've taken a lot of airtime, very happy to hear my colleagues' views as well.
Thank you. Anybody would like to add anything to that?
Lisa, could I say one more thing?
Yes.
Usually, you know, I like to look at things in reverse.
Mm-hmm.
And when you see somebody who has succeeded and trace it backwards and find out what caused that success, what things that happened during their upper level training process, during their audition process, during their prior to audition process, and trace that backwards, and then use that as a guideline. It might be different for your child or your student or whatever, but if you trace it backwards, you can get something of an idea of how things succeed. But when I have a parent that comes to me and says, I want my daughter to be a principal of the Royal Ballet so that my object is to get her into the Royal Ballet School, and you go, yeah, that's not going to work. You know, I mean, you have to think about things in a little bit more. Let's be a little bit more logical about these things, because I have very rarely seen someone do a straight line. Usually that line in some way veers, and you don't know where it's going to veer. But again, if you look at somebody who has achieved success within their objectives and trace it into how they achieved that success, you get a better barometer.
Thank you.
Can I just add to what Yannick and Christian has said? Yeah, I just wanted to say that I always say to students to look at the teachers, go to research the teachers, find out about the teachers who you want to study with. Yeah, aside from institutions, who do you think you want to study with and you would benefit most from? You know, so just wanted to add that in. And with the internet now, you can do a lot of research, and yeah, so there's no excuse for that. You know, but I think go for the teachers. I've always believed in that.
Thank you, Dr. Karen. Mr. Gary, do you have something to say?
Yes, I do. Firstly, I'd just like to acknowledge Yannick's very kind endorsement of the school. Thank you. But I just want to say also, what has often worked most favorably for us is to, obviously I'm talking in a pre-COVID environment, and I hope soon this will be effective in a post-COVID environment too. But actually, when people visit the school and spend a few weeks in that environment, it really makes a huge difference, because you can do a lot of work on the web. You can do an awful lot of through looking at pretty pictures on social media. But actually, until you invest in the environment of that school and have a sense of your engagement and belonging, it's very difficult to know if that's the right environment for you. And I just think a lot of the students who come to us who have been very successful often did not have the New Zealand School of Dance on their radar. But it's by saying to them, why don't you come and experience the school firsthand for yourself? Find out if this is going to be the best fit. Because I always say that a 90-minute audition is like, it's a very challenging situation. It's like an arranged marriage. We have 90 minutes together, and then we have every day for the next 3 years of our lives working together. How easy is it to make that assumption and know if it's the right fit? So I always encourage students, if possible, venture over there, find out what it's like for yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Gary. Ms. Zipping, I know that School of the Arts, I mean, we do academic work as well in School of the Arts. Then that can branch out a little bit more of, not just into physical dancing, right? Ms. Zipping, in terms of your program, would you like to share a little bit more about that, maybe?
Yes. So SOTA is, we offer both academic and arts program. And it's a 6 years program. So at years 5 and 6, that's where we call it the diploma years. So students prepare for the IB diploma. And we also have a different program called the IBCP program. And that is for students who want to pursue dance. So at years 5 and 6, instead of going heavy on academics, they go heavier on dance training. Yes. So that's how our program look like. So I'll tell you more about years 1 to 4. Years 1 to 4, we have our own program. So of course we do prepare students for IB, but in years 1 to 4, we have our own dance program. So that's where we groom, when students come in at 12 or 13, they all have mixed ideas of what they want to be, or they have a rose-tinted idea of what they want to be or who they can be. So that 4 years, actually from 12 or 13 to 16, those are the important years where my team of teachers, they work very, very dedicatedly to speak with the students. They mentor the students to listen to them, and also to speak with the parents what they really want out of this arts education and this academic education, and where they want to go. So from there, after year 4, then we begin to give more directed career counseling and to advise them on which program within the school or outside of SOTA will be most suitable for them.
Thank you, Ms. Zipping. I think the role, yeah.
I actually have a question for Zipping. Actually, I receive from many teachers. We have a lot of enrichment schools teachers here. I think very often they are facing one issue is how to balance academic and with dance training. So is that a very common thing? I think for SOTA is for the first 4 years, they are actually balancing both. How you manage that?
Yeah, it is true. Our students, I think they're super students. They really balance a lot on their plates, both the academics and the dance training. How do we balance? Are you asking how the teachers help them to balance?
Yes, or how the teachers help them. And also, I think very often we do see how parents, sometimes they have the conflict between what they want and what a child wants. So that's something I think we see a lot, especially in enrichment schools environments. So they are struggling the time and the energy between the academics required, or maybe the expectations from their parents, and also dance training.
How can we try to motivate them?
Yes, how can we try to motivate them, and how can we try to communicate between the teachers and parents and the students, so then we can work together, you know, to support them, rather than they are kind of like just pushing themselves, you know, and then fighting their preference maybe against the parents or the time schedule they have. So I always think that, you know, if we can work together and have more understanding and find a better balance out, and that will be quite supportive for a child's learning, academic, at the same time dancing.
Sorry, I'm not quite sure or clear about your question. Do you mean how we balance the dance and the
Yes, like
within SOTA, or?
No, in general, like for SOTA, there are a lot of students also, they are doing the dance training in the enrichment school, or they are from enrichment schools before joining SOTA. So, and then with that, you know, do you face maybe in the teachers and parents meeting, there are parents actually express the concern of the struggle between both, or maybe the time management between the both, or maybe their energies and the focus between the both.
Okay, so usually when we have our open symposium, okay, that is when prospective students want to join SOTA. We do let them have an idea of what the hours are like, okay, to be at SOTA, what our training hours are like, what the academic hours are like. So what we do is we aim to provide all the information, okay, that they need, yeah, about our training, our workload, and what the program is like. So we do that. We provide them with the information, and I think with everyone, time is, we only have 24 hours a day. We always tell our students, our parents, so they need to know. Okay, I think I'm echoing what Christian and Mr. Shergan has said. They need to know what they want for themselves, what they want, and then they choose if whatever suits them the best. Yeah, I think I understand what you mean by working together. So maybe that is where SOTA and perhaps the teachers from the enrichment schools can have a conversation about that, because rightfully what students and parents, they do outside of SOTA, we have no control over. Yeah, so I find that challenging to answer that part. Yeah, but what we have done is that we do, in open symposiums, open houses, we do share what our program is like, and that we do ask the students to consider that carefully when they want to join SOTA. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Either we will, anybody else would like to add anything, or if we have any questions from
Lisa, may I add to what Jiping said? I think something that isn't shared with parents enough is that there's this concept that dance training and academic training are completely separate. And while they might be different disciplines, there's a great deal that happens in a dance class. Dance students learn to be goal-oriented. They learn to be respectful of a teacher. They learn to be, there are things that happen within a dance class that if it's applied to academics, objectives that can, I mean, I'm thinking of a particular dancer who actually, the parent came to me and said they did well in school because of their dance training. Their dance training taught them to focus, taught them time management, taught them attention skills, taught them all sorts of qualities that they could then take into their academics, and they progressed. I'm not saying that's true in every case, but it certainly isn't one or the other. Dance training can actually help focus someone's mind and help them in their academics.
I totally agree with that.
But if we shared that with parents.
Very well said. That is something that I agree as well myself, when sometimes parents could be saying they don't have time for dance, but sometimes dancing might be an outlet for a lot of the students when they are stressed. Thank you very much. Are there any other questions that any of our attendees? Nishan, would you like to just show the gallery view so we can have a picture of everyone else in this? In the picture, and see if anybody would like to share anything, or that's a Q&A at the end now. If you would like to ask any questions, feel free to do that, please. You can raise your hands with the icon, or you can just unmute yourself and just raise, and then someone can. Do we have any questions for our speakers?
Be brave.
I got a question here. Is one of the parents asking if multiple dance genre is beneficial for a dance student. So.
Yes. Yes.
Can we elaborate on this? I'd love this discussion, because I think it is very beneficial, but I do believe that at one point you need to start specializing, and that will be in your last years. Because I think, especially in the younger years, when children are developing a passion for dance and coordination, and it's great to have as much knowledge of movement as possible. I think that's fantastic. But I think as you're getting towards graduation, you need to specialize, and really then focus on what you want to succeed in, where your strengths are. And I think everything else will be of benefit for you as you go into career, because you can be in your 30s and someone can ask you to tap. And if you haven't had that training as a young person, like I never did, you will struggle, yes.
Lisa, we actually have a question in our chat. Is asking selection criteria for SOTA, please.
Mrs. Ping would like to answer that.
Yes,
please.
Okay, so the selection criteria, well, it is that the student will have the potential to undergo our training program. Yeah, and besides the arts component, they also have to undergo a panel interview with our academic teachers. Yeah, so yeah, by and large, those are the main two criteria.
I think it probably answers to a lot of the other questions. Other schools as well, they will have their own sets of criteria, right? Yeah. Do we have any other questions from any other attendees?
I just got one. It's asking, is winning important in competitions for acceptance in the vocational school?
Is winning important?
Important to get acceptance to a vocational school or school. I see a lot of head shaking.
In fact, the opposite.
Yes.
In fact, the opposite.
Mr. Yannick, I think you have a very good an example to share, right? A good story about.
Well, actually, there was a particular young dancer who entered a very prestigious competition. And I helped this dancer get ready thinking he will never do well. He will never possibly, I mean, there's no way he can do well. But he went to the competition and he had the right physique, he had the right love of dance, he had the right interest level, and he didn't get any kind of a medal or acknowledgement in the competition. But all of the schools that went to that particular competition saw his potential, and he received many offers of acceptance and scholarships, he chose one of the schools. He went to that school, joined that company, and he became a principal dancer. And so even though he didn't win a medal, he ended up with a career, which I always thought was the better success.
Thank you. Thank you. I just received another questions regarding online courses. There has been quite a lot of online courses around. What do you feel about, what does the panel feel about all these online courses that have, you know, a short course? It could be a couple of months or it could be a couple of weeks, and then they come out with a certificate. What do you feel about these kind of courses?
Can I just start? I'll just start. Yeah. Okay. First of all, I mean, I think we're very lucky to have a plethora of classes being offered online by both professionals as well as amateurs. And I do stress those two words. And I think we have to be more discerning of what classes we are taking, whether they be short courses or whatever length they are. I would say perhaps to seek the advice of your teachers, you know, at the institution that you are studying at, and find out, because oftentimes we are not, you know, you're not in the know of who is, you know, is giving you valuable advice or, you know, classes. So seek the advice of your teachers to see what is, you know, what would benefit you at that point in time. Yeah. Because there's a lot of being offered online. You know, there's spoke for choice, actually. You know, I think that's what happened as soon as I love the word pivoted online, you know, as soon as the circuit breaker in Singapore happened, everybody was online. There was so much to you know, offered, and to have to sift through to find out, you know, what is best for yourself. Yeah.
Yes, I do agree. I do agree with that.
Can I speak to this as well? I think because there's so much, and as Yannick said earlier, a lot of these courses are free and a lot of the courses are paid, and we need to consider that a lot of people are seeing a great business opportunity here, which is not always in the best interest of the dancers. So I think perhaps as a teacher who is already working and you want to do some professional development, doing something online is probably a good upskilling opportunity. As Dran said earlier, when she was doing and still doing training online with graduating students who already have a very strong base, and this is a good exercise for them to develop self-motivation and have that level, they can start working on their own individuality and artistry. That's okay. But the young student who needs attention, so the good base needs to be established. I don't think we can really do this online. I think that needs to happen in the studio under supervision. Otherwise, there's risk of a lot of incorrect practice and habits, which will then be damaging to the body over time. We're not talking just about something that will not be aesthetically pleasing. We're talking about poor alignment, which will cause injuries over time. We need to consider this. I think it's great that there is access to these opportunities, but be very, very selective about what you're doing and who you are and what your skill level is and what your outcome is or desired outcome should be. That's my perspective.
Thank you very much. I think that is very, very, very valid comments about that. Instead of jumping into every single opportunity they get, it's probably wise to just choose and see what works. Mr. Gary.
Yeah, just to be short, I appreciate what everybody has said. I think that online learning is born out of necessity. It's something that we've all had to take on board. But I think we should never forget that this art form is about sharing and engaging and creativity. And it's the creations that are born of us all working collaboratively in the studio that makes beautiful work that inspires others. So I think we should just acknowledge that there are some advantages temporarily to online learning and online courses, but they are not a substitute.
Totally agree. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gary.
When it was mentioned about certificates and completions of sometimes it can lead to unreal expectations. A student will say, well, you know, I did this course and this course and this course, and I completed this. And then a certain amount of expectation might come, and then a disappointment might be the result. That's something that doesn't get addressed either. You know, the collection of certificates and doing this and that and this and that and this and that. And it even goes down to certain competitions as well. You know, that I did this, I did that, I did this, I did that. What's next from you? I deserve this. And that becomes problematic. Again, it's about finding the best, finding out what the students' goals are, you know, and identifying it that way. What is this, you know, and you can't really say if something's right or wrong, but you have to say what's your goal in this, and trying to clarify what somebody's goal is. Certificates worry me sometimes, because people sort of wave them around and say, but I've got this certificate and that says I'm good. No, that says you did something, and maybe you did it well, and maybe you just did it.
Thank you, Mr. Yannick. Mr. Christian, you had something to say.
No, I just want to second this very, very strongly. We some of our courses we've decided not to seek accreditation for, because then we can really focus on training rather than meeting state or federal regulations around the training, because the industry is dynamic and evolves very, very quickly. And with Queensland Ballet, we are very fortunate that Queensland Ballet and Queensland Ballet Academy are the same organization. We're not separate business entities. Therefore, as things are happening in the company, we can apply it into a training straight away. So I really discourage students who are after that piece of paper, which in our industry really has no value. You walk into the audition room, you can either dance or you can't dance. It's very simple. You could be the top of your class today, skip a class for a month, and let's have a discussion after, see how well you do. So that certificate is a nice to have, but it really has no value in the industry, because no director is after that. They're looking at your skill sets, they're looking at your artistry, they're looking at what you can contribute to their company, and that's what is important. Your training, not the piece of paper or that plastic trophy that you're going to win. Competitions are amazing in order to provide the opportunity. The repetition is good to help you be discovered, to self-assess yourself against your peers, and the same with courses. I think they're very, very important tools in your development, but do not focus on that. That's it. All it is just a piece of paper.
Thank you very much, Mr. Christian. Do we have any other questions?
I actually have quite a specific question here. It's quite a long question. It asks, if a child who loves ballet and want to pursue it further, but in terms of technique, performance, musicality, and other aspects are average, would she or he be able to someday have a career in ballet if she or he continues her training, but having average skills? What insight and advice can you give to both child and parents for such a situation?
Can I say something about that?
Yeah.
What we found in the professional world is that usually the exceptionally gifted students at about 11, 12, 13, 14 tend to fall out. And it's that second level that want it very, very much, or maybe have not ideal turnout, or aren't as loose as, or not a perfect body. Those are the people that want it very, very much. And now there's a certain level of ability and talent and all of those other things that, you know, average can mean a great deal of things. But exceptional doesn't need to be the criteria. We've often found that those people, so many names are running through my head right now, that do well in maybe competitions, or end up at the top of their class at a certain age, and they tend to drop away. And it's that level right underneath them that has ambition and determination, and has heard the word no, You need to work harder. Not always praise. That tends to get through. So there's nothing wrong with average.
Perseverance, yeah.
Determination.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Yannick. Right. Anyone else has any questions of the attendees? You can also still private text us, or if you want to speak, feel free to do so. I guess.
Running through the list.
I think this is what we have already.
Now we have another, is similar to what I have asked Mrs. Sapin, is more like how can I effectively communicate with my child to better balance her study and dance training if we have different opinions. So the same question I think many are facing.
I think it's between parents and students.
Yes. I do have one. It's from a school. The question is, our question is, given that online competitions are the safest options now, does the IBGPS regulate the number of competitors per age category? Lisa, maybe.
Regulate the number of competitors?
Yes. This is from, would you like to, Ellen, Miss Park, would you like to on your microphone and then maybe ask?
Who is this?
From Miss Park.
Yes, it's regulated the number of the competitors per each category, because some of the competition we saw like more than 50 packs of students. So how the judges judge about for that?
I can't quite see that. Okay. Each students will be judged accordingly with during the judge class. That's why we have the judge class, whereby judges will be able to see their technique involved, their basic technique, and there are also variations that they can judge. So for this year, we have them all recorded, and then some of them, the local judges are coming in on live as well to watch at the UCC theatre. And there are also video recorded for the overseas judges to watch. So there are criteria that they will have to, with their own professionalism, all the judges are professional enough, definitely, to watch and be able to give a score for that. But of course, like what Mr. Yannick has mentioned, and all the shake of the heads that said that, winning, it might not says everything about whether or not the person will get through. Like what Mr. Yannick has mentioned about the story about how some people, there are cases whereby they don't win anything, but then they are actually being seen by the judges who like them and then end up in a very good school. So that happens as well. Yeah. I hope that answers your questions about.
Okay, yes.
And of course, for IBGPS, we try to give a platform for everyone to be able to be exposed to the schools that they would like to go to, and a chance for them to be on stage to show their artistry.
We have one question from a teacher, say that given the judge class is over, can we teachers have some general advice regarding the candidates? And this is a question to all our jury judges. So after you view the judge class, what are the advice you can give it to all the teachers?
Should we start with Miss Joanne, perhaps?
Unmute. Well, it depends on the age of the student as well. There's some feedback I certainly can be confident in giving to the older students, because they are at that stage where their technique is developing, and you can see that some of the teaching has been consistent. I feel from my perspective, and I'm sure that I'm hoping the other lovely gentlemen, because it's all gentlemen, is getting the true basic technique really sound. So it's not so much about how much you do, it's how you do it. So from the very early, the young students, it's important that everything that you do with the younger ones is in keeping with what they should and can do. So yes, there are those students that have got facility and potential, and certainly you don't want to stop that, but there's also a really important part of being a dancer is not only technique, but musicality, and understanding why you're doing what you're doing. And this, I think, is really important, even from very early on, that the students are really, you need to be careful with what you teach them. They're like little sponges. So if you teach the young ones to really respect and understand why they're doing it, then that will follow through. And I didn't know Christian was for Ghana. Well, I understand, because where it is such an important aspect of training is from very early on is to have that consistency all the way through, that there are things that don't change for your basic technique. It's like a pianist, you practice your scales, and that's got to be really intuitive, and you need to understand it so that you can then build. And musicality and structure as well. And I feel that that's something that you see when you're watching class work, and it's important to really be focused on that as a teacher. So it's not about the competition. It's not about pushing that student, even though they can do some things, but it's being very careful and refine what you can from very early on, because as they get older, the habits are very difficult to change. So I feel that that's something that teachers need to just be patient, maybe just patience, just taking the time. I think we're all sometimes in a bit of a hurry to get everything done. And I think I've found myself, and I think we here at the Australian Ballet School have found that during this period of lockdown, and you've suddenly had to change about how you think and what you expect and what you want to deliver and how long you can take. And I think it's given us a little bit of a wake-up call as to you don't need to do it all now. And as dancers leave a school and they become professionals, you're still learning, you're still developing, you will still continually change. And so we've got to stop being in such a hurry. That's just what I feel.
Thank you.
So, there's something that, since it was discussed it's been discussed among many judges at many different competitions, but it's never communicated to parents or even to students to some degree. There are certain competitions now that will not send someone to consider scholarships if they see young dancers doing variations on point before a certain age. And that's important for parents to know, that schools do not think that if you see somebody at 12 doing something on point that they should not be doing, you don't want to validate it by offering that person encouragement. Because if someone's going on point too young, there's the possibility of difficulties in stress fractures, in foot problems, and all sorts of things. And there are schools that will say, we're not going to consider scholarships for somebody who is doing, even for some degrees of technique that are being, and it goes on to what Joanne's saying, if you see something that is been pushed forward to a student that's too young to be achieving that particular level of ability, or to see a 10-year-old boy doing double tours or an 11-year-old girl doing Aurora, you don't want to encourage that. And schools are very, very conscious of that by not validating that and saying that we're not going to consider that.
May I also add, I think likewise for the contemporary judge class, again, making sure that what the student is performing or doing is appropriate, that they have the skill set, the appropriate skill set to practice, to perform things like, walkovers and so forth, I saw a lot of gymnastics, type of movement. So much of it is about readiness. I also want to say something about contemporary. Unlike, I would say, like ballet, there are a myriad of styles, right, and approaches, from athletic to pedestrian to theatrical and so forth. So to expose yourselves to that, because instead of some of the older classes, right, there was a section called improvisation, right, and this is where we're looking at at the students. Their special, not just skills, but also their proclivities and their interests, and their ability to be spontaneous, right? And this is very, very important that this aspect is cultivated in a class setting. More and more about in being able to contribute to choreography is what many of the choreographers today are looking at. So this is something that needs to be cultivated in the classroom. Yeah, so keep on doing that. So not just set work, right, but also chances to explore and to express. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Karen. I have a question that is from one of the attendees posing to the juries of the IBGPS. I'm sure a lot of the juries here are also juries of competitions. They have asked any recommended resources we as teachers can refer to for original variations, or how are they allowed to tweak the variations in certain ways to the ability of the students?
It's not a good idea to tweak a variation.
Okay. So are there any resources that they can refer to?
Sorry, I'll jump in, sorry. I agree with Yannick. If you need to adapt the variation for the dancer, that just means they're not ready for the variation. I think if you're looking at the variation, if you're looking at Giselle, go back to what the Paris Opera is doing. If you're looking at a ballet that was first choreographed in Russia, then go there. Look at the early videos that you can find to find the more original styles, I think. Or what is current best practice, and that's very easy to find out if you just go on YouTube. But I think finding variations from competitions that have been tweaked and readjusted, and you do one section from a Russian version, another one from a Cuban version, and then you do something of your own at the end, that is really highly unacceptable, actually. So if the dancer is not ready for the variation, unless the competition had said or set a version where there's a simplified variation or simplified fairy variation for young kids that they could put on point. I think look for competitions that are very clear with their guidelines, and again, safe dance practice is key. A program that matches the age group, as Yannick said earlier, doing it on point at 11 does not make you more appealing at all. In fact, I'll be very put off by someone who's won a major competition at the age of 12 with Esmeralda, because that would be a nightmare to put in a class later, and you have to pull them back and start from scratch in a class with students who are probably not at that level. And as Yannick said, they're probably already, forgive me, I'm looking for the English word, already starting with an injury that'll probably just pop up in a few months or next year. So yes, I think we need to be really smart about doing this. But can I just go back, sorry, to the previous question that you had about the training? And I think it's very easy for us to sit here and tell you what you need to do with your students and what we're seeing is missing. I also want to acknowledge that it must be recognized that some of you are only seeing students for 2 hours a week and others are seeing the student for 25 hours a week. So it doesn't really speak of your ability as a student. You could be the best teacher. If someone's only coming to you 2 hours a week, there's only so much you can do. But then we need to go back again, going back to the same place. The program needs to be age and level appropriate. So if you have a student that you're teaching for 14 hours and another one for 2, they can't be doing the same variation in the same competition. That is not safe and smart practice.
Thank you. That's very valid. Thank you, Mr. Christian.
Can I just add, first of all, in terms of resource, I see competitions all over the world. And I would have to say that the greatest resource that any teacher can give the student is to allow them to see the whole ballet, allow them to understand the context from which those solos are extrapolated. Because invariably what happens is only that solo is taught and the student has no real concept of the context of that ballet, nor its historical context, nor its musical reference. And all of those things enhance the student's understanding of what it is that they are trying to dance. And the second point goes back to the issue about quality of presentation. We're all dance teachers. We spend our lives trying to enhance the student's tendu. Of course, it's what we do every day, and we all appreciate well-trained dancers. But for me, as a jury member, the thing that heightens my marking is to see the dancer expressing himself or herself within the solo. If it is only based upon training and technique, it becomes a bare average. Because what happens is when you see many solos dance the same, you become blind. You actually don't see the dancer any longer. And what happens is you end up with an average score. So the point of difference is that moment where a student finds expressivity and can show you something of who they are. And that for me always stands out. And that's where I'm up much, much higher.
Thank you, Mr. Gary. I think that this is all the questions we have from my attendees. Anything else from your side, Ha-Ying?
No, I asked all the questions I have on my end. Anybody else would like to ask a question or raise the hand?
Having very little to do with the moment we find ourselves in right now. There's always a discussion of scholarships. You know, my student is going to be given this scholarship or that scholarship. While scholarships are important in some circumstances for financial need, and sometimes they're vital, absolutely vital, which is why competitions are so important, that they can help somebody who doesn't have the resources, because dance training is expensive. And I can interject one little, since Lisa's asked me once or twice to tell stories. It's not that they're stories. There's a dance teacher that I think Gary Trinder knows quite well, Katie Wade, who used to tell this story quite often when she was a judge or a master teacher. And she said that she said to her father at one point, she said, all the things that you could have done with what you spent for my training or you know, the hours that you spent getting me to and from classes, and all those things that were possible if you didn't have to do that. And her father turned to her and said, but sweetheart, I gave you a career. What does that matter? You know, what does it matter that it cost a bit of money or cost a bit of time? I gave you a career. And that's important to remember when parents are looking at the possibility of what things cost and the time that things take. And it all has to be balanced, but in the long run, if you can provide a student with the opportunity that they're looking for, not to be blinded by a scholarship. Scholarships are very, very vital and very, very, very important, but they're not the only reason to do something.
Thank you for that, Mr. Yannick. Right. I think we have most of the questions answered. Thank you very much for the speakers today and all the attendees. Thank you very much for tuning in as well for those in live streaming. It is very informative and we really appreciate it. We still have the Ask a Question page on our IBGPS website. So if anyone would like to ask any questions, feel free to do that and we will try to answer those questions again. Thank you very much, Mr. Yannick, Ms. Zuping, Mr. Gary, Mr. Christian, Ms. Joanne, Dr. Karen, thank you very much. Thank you. We will see you next few days. Thank you. We will end this meeting now.